Exactly, exactly. Yeah, that's another good point. Another one, another example, another definition. Lisa? It's not so easy, right, to talk about this book. Go ahead. Okay, maybe. Fast forward, yes. Yes. Yeah, yeah. So what it means here, very good point. You see, now you know why I spent so much time preparing this study because it's not so easy. So really, love is not something you see in the distance and like playing football. You know, you tackle it down and you wrestle it, and that's how you conquest love. Love doesn't work that way. You don't just, you know, go and fast forward and you're just gonna tackle it and you're just going to. Um, it does. Yes. Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yes. And how it can pollute and make it a lot worse. And that's the reason why it says until it's proper time, just hold your horses, because if you don't permit time, things can get you don't get to get that magic and really the proper relationship that God intended. So this verse, again, very self-explanatory, as you have mentioned, is don't rush love. It's so easy to rush love, and I'll say this, girls have even a greater tendency to be hopelessly romantics and rush love in many ways. This is just my perception, okay, and I'm not sexist or trying to point fingers, but in my experience, I think men's are much more reserved a little bit, and actually men get a little spooky when a girl is like all over, like, okay, just, I need a little bit of time, right, a little bit of space. Some of you are smiling and thinking I'm talking about, okay, so one, again, speaking of women, and that's why the passages, it says young women of Jerusalem. This is God speaking to women here. Young women, don't awaken love. Don't rush love. Love will come, but don't rush it. And I'll tell you, I mean, even, when before I was married, in any boy, I guess, when you go to high school and through college, you have, girls around you that just, okay, Lisa's smiling, that like a relationship with you. But I felt also that if a girl comes and really throws themselves at you, you're like, ooh, just kind of, it feels so unnatural, it's like, I don't want that, And not to mention that men, to a lot of extent, is what I call them, they're like hunters. They like to go and chase the prey as opposed to, oh, here I am. There's a song in my old country, Romania, about love, comparing it to a doe, right? Doe is not going to come to you, to a hunter, says, come on, shoot me, right here. Which part of, do you want, what part of me do you like steak the best, right? I mean, if a doe comes to you, you're not going to just shoot it right there. Like, oh, you say, no, I don't want to shoot, I want a little bit of challenge, right? Well, right, but you know what I mean. Even if a buck comes to you, I tell you, if you're a hunter and you are sleeping somewhere in the morning, you have a buck right there next to you, kind of sniffing you're not going to say, oh, let me shoot you right now. It's like, what's the challenge, right? Bradley, how do you do it? Bradley's like, no, I'll get it, but this is my buck.
I think that's one of the things. I think everyone's different, but I
yeah.
think that there are people who would go and be like, oh, look, my first one, boom, got it, cool. But then if it's too easy, hunting gets boring.
It gets boring, yes. Yes, exactly.
And if women are just going themselves at you and you're sitting there going, hey, okay, I'm Mr. Player over here, and you're going for that, eventually you're going to sit there and go, this is boring.
Yes.
I want a challenge.
Yes.
I don't want some sweet
that's why when you don't rush it, as a woman, when you don't rush it, you'll be much more successful in establishing that relationship that is long-lasting, that we're going to see in the following chapter. So, as I mentioned, girls do have that tendency to be more romantic. Obviously, my wife is much more romantic than I am. I'm just much, to me, I'm more practical that way. It is a women thing. Thank you for not calling me a sexist. Okay, so they tend to rush into relationships more often, and once in a relationship, a woman, the pressure and the desire to be intimate becomes strong, and it can become a problem in a relationship, right? I think you know what I'm talking about. So, once then it's rushed, the relationship can suffer. Songs of Solomon, chapter 2, verse 7. Again, we read, do not awaken love before its proper time. So this verse is saying that as hard as it is, you must wait for both the right guy and the right time to be intimate. Otherwise, the relationship is doomed. Doomed from the start. If you rush it, if you don't wait for the right guy, if you don't wait for the right moment, even if it is the right guy, you can't just throw yourself and say, oh, here I am, I'm all yours. The second date or the first date. It's not, God's method is not this. We live in a world, sex is so glorified to where, you have one date, two date, and then boom, immediately it's, sexual relationships. And this is not how it's presented here in Songs of Solomon, and that's not God's way. Not God's way. First, it just destroyed the relationship because then the man is like, okay, well, next, I guess. And then, you are as a woman kind of there looking like, what's going on? I thought you loved me. And, no, not so much. Lisa. Yeah.
Have the freedom to do it whenever I want, with whomever I want. And now, on the news today, they're talking about STDs being on the rise, and people are wondering why.
Yeah.
Why? In one hand, you say I should have freedom to do it with whoever, whenever I want, and then I just don't understand.
Yeah.
STDs are on the rise. Well,
STDs is just a small thing, really, when you talk about the anguish, the emotional pain, and really the purpose, and really the model that God set in place to be followed for a man and a woman to have that superior relationship, that wonderful relationship that lasts over the entire life, that just kind of grows and improves as time goes by. Mark even has something to say. Go ahead.
It's very, very
Mark is an expert, by the way, in this topic.
It's very, very interesting to me to see how Song of Solomon is talking about sex and marriage this way, because there was a study done that essentially asked people that were just jumping from person to person to person to person to person, and people that stayed in marriage, which one was happier and which one was like more satisfied and just better. And it was clear.
Absolutely.
People that were married, they were just so much happier. And people
Yeah.
that had all this freedom to do whatever they wanted, they were
Miserable. Yep, that's true.
It's crazy. Song of Solomon.
Yes, exactly. So again, and John, you had your hand up, sir.
I believe that men are more like, the one-hitter quitters,
Yeah.
the wham, bam, thank you, man, next,
Yeah.
more than women.
It's true. It's true. But again, keep in mind. the passage here is given to the woman. The woman is supposed to be the one to say, no, I see that, I'm not going to rush like that, even though no matter. And not to mention that this is talking about, if you're talking about a godly man, obviously that man will know what sexual sin is in the front end.
But when you have like a 12-act in your system, I mean,
Yes.
what kind of stop you?
Exactly. Absolutely nothing. Yes, absolutely nothing. So then in chapter 2, because he talks about, again, what is the topic here? You are in that initial intimate pre-marriage. Who wants to read chapter 2, verse 15? Talk about foxes. Who wants to read this? Lisa.
Catch us the foxes, the little foxes that spoil the vines, for our vines have tender grapes.
What is foxes here? You read this passage, okay, foxes, catch us foxes. What in the world are you talking about? Anybody knows what foxes are here? Okay, you don't know. So the verses here is comparing sex and other things that destroy a young relationship to foxes that destroy vineyards. So the same way that sex can destroy a relationship if it's right when it's not supposed to be, the same way that you have foxes that can destroy a field. I never had foxes. I have rabbits, and I'll tell you, I can put a garden, and if you put rabbits there, they're going to destroy the garden. The same thing with foxes, apparently. If you take a bunch of foxes and you put them in a vine, right, when the fruit is just getting ready, they're going to destroy it. And that's exactly really how the comparison here is, what foxes mean. So this love is full bloom, and the admonition here is, why are you willing to ruin it with sex, with lies, with shadiness, with all those games, right? So that's really what it means. Verse 2 then, verses 16 and 17, who wants to read this? 16 and 17.
My beloved is mine, and I am his. He feeds his flock among the lilies until the day breaks and the shadows flee away. Turn, my beloved, and be like a gazelle, or a young stag upon the mountains of Bether.
Okay, very good. So this verse is very similar to the one before. If the relationship is truly meant to be, you don't need sex to make it last. Right? So you have each other, and as long as you promised to keep the foxes out of your relationship before you get married, there's really nothing to worry about. I mean, you have a lifelong of relationship before that you can have as many foxes as you want, but in this point in the game, foxes can destroy. Yes?
So I was just thinking, so he had like a polygamy marriage. He had, what, 700 wives?
Yeah, 300
So
concubines,
he
yes.
must have been the man that liked the excitement, you know?
Yeah, like the kind of that John has
Yeah,
mentioned.
because every
Yeah.
time he would see his wife, it's
Yes.
always like she throws himself on him.
Yeah.
And it never gets to that point in marriage where
Mm-hmm.
that kind of fades away, I guess you would say. So he's always.
Well, yeah, but with him is different because, I mean, obviously the relationship that he has is very different. And that's what I don't believe that this actually, it is one of the relationship between him and another woman, because he had so many women that I don't know he experienced that intimacy with just one.
I know, so he just kept.
Yes. But again, keep in mind, this over here, it's about the boy here was like the shepherd boy back home, and they had this relationship that was very different than whatever Solomon had with all his 1,000 women, actually. So really, when the temptation arises, flee. Don't invite the foxes into the play. All that brings is destruction, and really the relationship is going to suffer because of it. Okay, so kept the foxes away, and then chapter 3 talks about marriage. So chapter 3 verse 4, here, this is one of Lisa's favorite passage, or who wants to read this? Bradley?
Sure. When I found the one my heart loves, I held him and would not let him go till I had brought him to my mother's house.
Very good. So this woman knows that this man is the one, that she's going to be with him for the rest of her life. So obviously it's only natural that she would want him to introduce him to his family and to his mom and to get the blessings for marriage like he was back when. And then in verses chapter 6, I would like to read this. If I can have a volunteer, read just these few verses. You want to continue, Bradley?
Sure. What is that coming up from the wilderness like columns of smoke, perfumed with myrrh and frankincense, with all the fragrant powders of a merchant? Behold, it is the litter of Solomon. Around it are 60 mighty men, some of the mighty men of Israel, all of them wearing swords and expert in war, each with a sword at his thigh against terror by night.
So you see, this is a very poetic language here, and it talks as if, obviously, we're talking about marriage here. And the next passage even make mention of King Solomon, that he made himself a carriage from the wood of Lebanon, and he positioned himself as if it was his wedding. But depending how you read this, it could be as if the wedding was as extravagant as if it was a king's wedding. And for most women, for most men, I mean, their wedding is very special, right? I mean, can you say, boy, my wedding was really terrible? I mean, you can make your wedding very special, right? So these verses describe how elaborate a marriage between a man and a woman can be. And it certainly doesn't mean that every wedding should be fancy and so grand. But obviously Solomon was a king, and natural for him to give the best of the best to his woman, although I'm not suggesting that he's the man in this picture, is that as if it was a king type marriage, that it was so extravagant. So marriage certainly is a celebration of love, and it doesn't matter how elaborate the wedding it is, as long as it is done for the right reason. And you are proud of how well you handle yourself during the dating process, that will lead to a great union of marriage, right? So what happened after the marriage? After the marriage comes the honeymoon, chapter 4. So chapter 4, first few verses here, if I can have another volunteer. Go ahead, Andrea.
How beautiful you are, my darling. Oh, how beautiful. You are altogether beautiful, my darling. There is no flaw in you.
Very good. I like how you read that. So, the first 7 verses of chapter 4, the husband spends time just in awe of how beautiful his wife is. Very romantic. So obviously, instead of just jumping right into the sex, he wants to make sure that the wife feels comfortable, protected, that he says the right things, that he makes her feel comfortable and loved and all that. So that's what happens in the honeymoon. So girls are super emotional and insecure. So these praises is exactly what a woman needs.
Not to get in the mood, but they just need it every day.
I don't know. So the bottom line here is they need every day to be told that they're wonderful and all that, right? Yes, exactly. Yes.
But not what you said.
Well, no, but look at this passage. It says, oh, how beautiful you are, altogether beautiful, my darling, there's no flaws in you. There you go. So obviously, he was telling her all that, which was good. It will change a little later. Hey, listen. It will listen, there's a whole chapter dedicated to that, okay? We're going to get there. Because this very much talks about the normal. You know, you have a honeymoon. In the honeymoon, there's no faults, right? When you have honeymoon, I mean, you are so blinded by love that you marry with the most amazing person in the world, right, John?
No, I gotta say I had a shotgun wedding.
When? What do you mean?
Like
You don't know?
an hour wedding, like a 10-minute wedding.
10-minute wedding? Okay.
Vegas wedding.
Well, this is not a Vegas wedding.
The wedding cake before the wedding.
Okie dokie. Well, this is different. This is how it's supposed to be. So obviously, as I mentioned, sex, especially when it's confined to marriage, it's much more than just a physical act, and it is important to make your partner feel appreciated. And I appreciated what Andrea said, that it is very important for the man to tell the woman how much he appreciates her and how much. And I'll tell you, men, we don't say that enough. I'll tell you that. I'm guilty of that. We can all do better of that.
It's both ways.
It is both ways, but I think men need it less than women. Yes. So, verse 16. says, let my beloved come into his garden and taste its choice fruits. There you go. So that's really when the foxes get invited. Then at this point, it's just, this is the meaning, really. This is the meaning. So if it doesn't, you see that the language is so poetic, it's not going to make it look like into exactly what's happening. But at this point, the wife feels completely loved and secure and wants to feel and make her husband feel, and have a good time, right? And consummate the marriage. So during the honeymoon. And then chapter 5, married life. What happens during marriage? So chapter 5 verse 1, here it says, eat friends and drink your fill of love. And again, this line proves that marriage, and in particularly sex, it is a gift from God, and he created it for you to enjoy it. So when it says eat friends and drink and feel your love, this again talks about sex. I mean, I don't know how to spin this. This is the meaning. So when you're married, you can have all the foxes, I guess I could say that word instead of using the S word, you can have, and it will keep you connected and you will improve your relationship, right? So then we move in chapter 6, and then who wants to read chapter 5 verse 6? Lisa?
I opened for my beloved, but my beloved had left. He was gone. My heart sank at his departure.
Oh, so something is happening now. This is their first fight. So guess what? Sometimes in marriage, this is not really anything, no more foxes here. So I opened for my beloved, and all of a sudden he was gone.
He went to his other seven.
No. That's not what happened. So for the rest of the chapter, actually, we see the couples having their first fight. And when the wife finally decides to let him in, to really say, okay, I want to make things up, he's no longer there. He left. So she goes looking for him and returns home with no luck, can't find him. That's really what the chapter 5 is about. And she asks all her friends to keep an eye out for him. And, the friends are telling him, why are you putting up with this? I mean, the friends are not necessarily telling her good advice. And even though she's hurt, however, if you read to chapter 5, she refuses to say anything bad about her love, her man, even though I'm sure that she has strong feelings about it. So the man and the woman both handle the situation in a respectable manner. And this is a very good example of how arguments and challenges and difficulties can occur in marriage and how to handle it. The man recognizes how angry he was, and he went away to cool down rather than exploding and just letting her have it. So this is what happens. And an example for men. Men, whenever your wife or makes you feel like you want to just strangle her, just cool off. Just kind of say, okay, I'm just disconnect, unplug, and just kind of take a little time until you cool off. So also the wife did the right thing by not dissing her husband, even though she was hurt. So talking bad about your partner makes you look pretty bad. So it is important, taken after example, because she had an opportunity to speak bad about him, but she doesn't in chapter 5. So what happens? That's marriage. And you saw the first fight, how that was handled, with him just going to take a cool off. And then when he comes back, chapter 6, it's about forgiveness, right? Because in marriage, things can happen, and then mistakes can happen, and then forgiveness can occur, and then you can be in peace again, as opposed to keep on having the fight. Chapter 6 verse 3, who wants to read this? Aaron?
I am my beloved, and my beloved is mine. He browses among the lilies.
Very good. So all of a sudden they made up, they kissed, and then everything, now it's fine again. So we discover here that even though the man left, the woman knows exactly what her husband is in the garden to cool down. And by the way, point here, he didn't go to a bar. He didn't go to meet other women. He just went somewhere to cool down in the garden. That's where she found him. So he did not go to another bar or to another woman or some other place that will cause even more problem. He just went to a secluded place, somewhere even where he knew that his wife would find him, right? And that's exactly what happens. Chapter 6 verse 4, then we see how the man gets over it because his anger passes. And who wants to read this? Barrett?
You are as beautiful as Tisra, my darling, as lovely as Jerusalem, as majestic as troops with banners.
Very good. So this is the man speaking. Now, what is Tisra? Tisra is a city. Okay, it's a beautiful city somewhere near Samaria. So it's like to say you're as beautiful as the city of Rancho Mirage, or as a city as Indian Wells. Indian Wells, I think, is one of the most cleanest city. When you go to Indian Wells, so pretty. Oh, you're so pretty. You're so pretty like Indian Wells. I'm gonna start saying that to my wife. I know she'll appreciate it. Yeah. So the wife went in search, and when she found the husband, he was no longer angry. So he took the time he needed to cool down, and never once even confronted her about the issue. Everything is fine. Push it back. So that's not to say that it wouldn't be resolved maybe in a later, more calm matter, but it is important that when she humbly came to to him, confrontation was not that important. Forgiveness and love what's at the top of the priority. So it's important here. The lesson we learned from this is that whenever the husband or the wife is angry, allow some time for the two to just calm down. That's why one of my strategy when, my wife very rarely, does something, and I think is not fair. My philosophy is to just kind of calm myself, just not say anything. 2-3 days later, I'm myself again, Eventually. So, but, bottom line is that, it's good to stay calm and don't have the conversation when you're angry. I've learned through my years in corporate America and coaching and settling crucial conversations that when your mind is flooded with all kinds of hormones that think, fight or flight, very emotional. You cannot be rational when you are angry or when you're mad. When you have those emotions, you cannot make a conscious decision and really found that best path forward. Right, John?
We had a neighbor growing up in the neighborhood that whenever he get angry, wife, he would chase it with a butcher knife around outside of the house in the backyard. And you had all these neighbors outside looking at all this like, how come nobody calls the cops? This thing is running for her life. The guy chasing her with a butcher knife, and it's like.
Yeah, that's not in the Songs of Solomon. That's not the pattern for a good relationship in a marriage. I doubted that relationship.
Still married right now.
Or you have to.
Married for like 50 years, 50 plus years.
Well, there's toxic relationships all over the place, and women that don't have options, but it's sad. That certainly shouldn't be like that. But again, keep in mind, the point of this lesson is so we can learn the kind of relationship that God expects us to have, right? Marriage relationship. So then what happens after you make up? Of course, chapter 7 is intimacy post-marriage. Chapter 7 verse 10 says, I belong to my beloved and his desire is for me. This entire chapter is saying that sex is only getting better with time and with years as the two are married. Your desire deepens, you get to know the other person better, and you can be more fully assured that really you are the only one for her and vice versa. And because of that, the relationship grows. It's really amazing that, a relationship, a marriage relationship can grow year after year after year, and the two can get closer and closer and closer together. And it's true. I think I told you this before when I told somebody that me and my wife were married for 10 years at the time, and the person says, you're just getting started. I was like, what? Just getting started. Yes, it gets a lot better with age. And now I've been married for 20-some years, and I feel that it is, the closeness that you have, it's, I don't think that there's any point that you can say, okay, I'm just as close to you as I'm ever going to be. You get closer and closer and closer. So the two become one at a much more deeper level than when they first had the honeymoon together and they thought they were more in love than ever, right? Because it does get better. So, and this is what chapter 7 is about. Then in chapter 7, verse 10 and 11 says, I am my beloved and his desire is for me. Come, my beloved, let us go into the fields and lodge in the villages. This is one of my favorite sections, because this is just because you've been married for a long time doesn't mean your relationship has to be monotonous and boring. Go out on dates, spend nights outside, out of the house, be out, enjoy life. I took this a little too literal when I took my wife on a jet ski in Florida, and she almost killed me, and not going to do that again. So obviously, do things together that, she enjoys too, but, it's important to not just have a boring relationship to where you don't go anywhere. Canoeing, yes, canoeing down a easy river. We did that too. But I'm not going to take a jet skiing again. Can you believe it? She doesn't like jet skiing. Okay, well, you have to adjust. So maybe we'll try it again. Deal with it. Yes, I do. Okay, and then chapter 8 is they live together happily ever after. This is what the chapter 8 is about. So chapter 8, verse 4, as I'm running out of time, it says, guess what it says? It says it again. Daughters of Jerusalem, I charge you, do not arouse or awaken love until it so desires. So 3 times this verse appears in the book. And as I mentioned earlier, it's pretty much the theme of the book. One of the most important things for the woman to remember, that you don't chase her, you don't just tackle it down. You just have to woo it, to where it just comes to you, right? So we have seen, again, the man and the woman throughout this entire relationship. We have seen the ups and downs, but most importantly, we see how awesome marriage it is when it's approached from God's perspective, when we approach it from how God intended it to be. And we can't help really but even envy a relationship like this. But if we follow the pattern that we see here, don't invite the foxes too early. Make sure that you only connected with her, and respect her, respect each other. Anybody can have this kind of relationship that God really prescribes here. So marriage is super awesome, but only when it's done right. Because if it's not done right, it could be really like a piece of hell on earth, when it's supposed to be a piece of heaven on earth. Okay, so 2 more slides. This is a little bit about comparison of God's love. So the Song of Solomon I mentioned earlier, it's a parallel of God's love for his people, as long, certainly you're not going to take it literally, but God takes the figure of the man, and the church takes the figure of the woman, or Jesus takes the figure of the husband, and the church takes the figure of the bride, right? So the relationship between God and his followers should be intimate, just not on the physical level, but that is the relationship that God intends to have with us, very intimate, very close. So our relationship with God is based on basic trust, loyalty, respect, and unconditional love, just the same way that our love should be for our husband, right? Or if you're a woman, if you're men, for your wife. So the greatest thing about God's love is that no matter how far you stay, he'll always welcome you back with open arms, because the church is the bride of Christ. So the marriage is something to be taken very seriously. And when the relationship with our spouses model the relationship that God has with us, it really turns into the kind of relationship that God desires and God has made for all of us to enjoy. That's the study. Yes, you have a question?
My mom got remarried. She's not in a good relationship. That dude treats you like crap.
Yes, exactly. So unfortunately, there's many relationships that are like that. But most likely, I'll tell you, whoever that person is has a terrible relationship, they did not follow the steps here of the relationship that we saw in the Songs of Solomon. And it's true. There's so many relationships that are terrible. But my suggestion is that if you follow the biblical pattern for a successful marriage, you will have a wonderful marriage. That is the theme for the night. So I appreciate your paying attention today and your participation as we are concluding this study. And then with that, we're going to ask Mark, and we're going to have a closing song, and then we're going to have a closing prayer. Maybe John, I can ask you?
with the Savior we enter the glory land.
Won't it be wonderful there?
Ended the troubles and cares of the storyland. Won't it be wonderful there? Won't it be wonderful there? Having no burdens to bear, joyously singing with heart bells all ringing. Oh, won't it be wonderful there? Walking and talking with Christ the supernal one. Won't it be wonderful there? Praising, adoring the matchless eternal one. Won't it be wonderful there? Won't it be wonderful there? Having no burdens to bear, joyously singing with heart bells all ringing. Oh, won't it be wonderful there? There where the tempest will never be sweeping us. Won't it be wonderful there? Sure that forever the Lord will be keeping us. Won't it be wonderful